All right, thank you everybody for joining us and welcome to today's BU Professional Development Webinar, The Thought Leader Formula, Strategically Leverage Your Expertise. My name is Jeff Murphy. I'm a member of the Career Programs team here in the Office of Alumni Relations. Today's webinar is sponsored by Boston University Alumni Relations and is offered to our 339,000 alumni around the globe. Throughout your career, BU is committed to helping you define and achieve your professional goals. And we aim to do this by providing access, by providing our alumni access to a series of valuable online tools and social media communities. I know that we have alumni joining us today from some very faraway places like China, Greece, the UK, India, Saudi Arabia, Taiwan, Vietnam for the first time. We've got somebody joining us, Clovis, California, Boulder, Colorado, Wilmington, Delaware, Davie, Florida, Marietta, Georgia, Leavenworth, Kansas, Las Vegas, Nevada, Tuckahoe, New York, Hood River, Oregon, Cypress, Texas, and as always, dozens of Massachusetts alumni from towns like Attleboro, Brookline, Clarksburg, Dover, Everett, Fiskdale, Groton, and more. For each and every one of you out there, thank you for joining us. We really do value your participation in this program. Before I introduce today's speaker, some brief housekeeping notes. As you know by now, this webinar is being hosted on our Zoom online meeting platform. If you experience any trouble with the audio or visual portions of today's presentation, I'll ask that you please contact Zoom support directly. See the number on your screen down below, and for those of you listening in, it's 1-888-799-9666. Today's presentation is being recorded and will soon be made available for on-demand viewing on the BU alumni website found at bu.edu/alumni. Our speaker today is very eager to answer any questions you may have, and you're welcome to submit them throughout the presentation using the Q&A feature on Zoom. If you hover over your screen and find the menu, you'll see a Q&A box. Just click on Q&A and then you'll be able to type your question. We'll save plenty of time at the end of the presentation to make sure that we get through all of those. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker for the day, BU School of Hospitality Administration alumna, Robin Farmanfarmaian. Robin is a professional speaker, entrepreneur, and angel investor focusing on cutting-edge medical and biotech companies poised to impact 100 million patients. Currently, she's the CEO and co-founder of ARO, or Aerodynamic Vision Correction and Eye Health Monitoring. Recent investments include Invicta Medical, a medical technology company for sleep apnea, and Dance Biopharm, inhaled insulin with a smart connected device. In addition to being an entrepreneur, Robin is also a leading speaker with over 125 speaking engagements in 12 countries. Robin educates audiences on technology, the future in healthcare, patient empowerment, and certainly building thought leadership, which is what we have her doing here today. Robin has 2 published books, The Patient as CEO, How Technology Empowers the Healthcare Consumer in 2015. And just this year, Robin, congratulations on publishing The Thought Leader Formula, Strategically Leverage Your Expertise to Drive Business and Career Goals. I invite everybody to learn more about Robin by visiting her website at www.robinff.com. Robin, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate your time. I'm going to go ahead and get my slides off, and then you can go ahead and upload yours or get yours going, and then the floor is all yours.
Perfect. So I am so excited to be here today. Here we go. You never get used to like people introducing you. So let me tell you, that's always kind of like, you're like,
I like to make it nice and awkward too, just so you know.
Yes. You know, it's always good to hear your own accomplishments back, right? No. So first of all, I want to welcome everyone. But secondly, this is interactive. The goal is that at the end of the webinar, you are going to have clear, concise next steps that you need to take, as well as a clear kind of draft foundation for your own thought leadership. So to that end, in the chat, Jeff, I think you're going to chat for them. Either grab a piece of paper, make sure you've got something handy you can type on, or Jeff is going to chat right now a Google Doc that I made. So it's the Google Doc of all the questions that we're going to go through and place for you to put your answers. So if you use that and you put your email address in, Google Docs will just automatically email you right afterwards all of your answers, plus the questions written down so you don't have to worry about things. So let's just dive. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I should mention for finding the chat, I should have mentioned that earlier. Sorry, Robin. Much like finding the Q&A, it's just a separate option for chat. And if you click on chat, you'll see that I've already, the first message is from me, and it's the link to the Google Doc along with a welcome message from Robin. So sorry for that. Go ahead.
Awesome. Perfect. So first, let's talk about why this is going to benefit you and who actually benefits from being a thought leader. And when I say thought leader, really just known by your industry as an expert in your vertical. You don't necessarily have to be a professional speaker. You don't need to be an author necessarily, but you just want to become known for your ideas. And this is really fantastic for people who are employees or executives in corporations, right? Or in nonprofits, purely because it can help you drive career goals. You can get promoted more easily because you're visible, but you also have a greater negotiating power. When you're something like a consultant or an attorney, right, or a scientist, people who have a very specialized area of expertise can really help drive customers for you. So especially in the world of consulting and in the law, you can double or even triple your hourly rate a lot of the time if you are known for your ideas. In terms of entrepreneurs, like I am a serial crazy early stage entrepreneur, it helps immensely because what it does is it opens up doors. If you are starting an unknown company or you have an unknown idea, you need to get in front of investors. You need to get in front of potential corporate partners or even potential, employees, because you, of course, as a startup, you're constantly hiring. And so it will really open up those types of doors for you. And lastly, in terms of like healthcare professionals, if you are a physician or a nurse or anyone working in the $3.5 trillion industry that is our healthcare system, it really can help you a lot because especially when in the terms of doctors, it teaches you to simplify your message so you can really reach more patients, right? And really make a difference. All right, so I want to introduce this first concept, really, welcome to You, Inc. And when I say that, I want you to start thinking about thought leadership as a business. This is not a side project. And that's where I see a lot of people kind of get lost in the weeds. They think of this as kind of their side project. So they're going to do a couple hours on weekends if they have time, or they're not going to put very much money into it or that much effort. You have to understand this is a business, right? And so you need to have divisions. You need to hire people. You need to spend money to make money. And you need to look at this as a business that will help your basic career, wherever you normally make money. And by understanding this as a business, these are just some tips I like to give people is, really choose those top 4 or 5 things you're best at and outsource the rest. What I mean is you're an expert in your content, right? Say you are a lawyer or you're an executive. You're not necessarily an expert writer, or you're not necessarily an expert speaker, right? These are skills that people learn over time. So you can outsource a lot of things, right? If you are, really just focused on your content, you can hire people to help you write things. You can hire people to do your marketing for you. I mean, one of the things that I outsource quite frequently are like my slide design. I did some of the slides that we're looking at, but for the most part, I just have, an on-demand designer that will just take some of my words and make them kind of pretty for me, right? It's not one of my core skills. Secondly, remember, no isn't personal, because in this business, it's much like you would see, say, in the entertainment industry with actors or actresses. You're going to hear no a lot. You are going to have people who don't agree with your opinion. And so really understand this is nothing, it's not personal, right? When you hear no in this context, just like in business, it's because your business goals are not aligned with each other. It is not personal. And so take that when you first go out there, because you're going to hear some no's. Thirdly, money is going to get wasted, right? And this is a big deal for a lot of people. When I first started, I'm like, okay, I ended up, spending $2,000 on something that didn't work out well, or $500 on this designer, and I hated the website that they came up with. This happens in business. It's going to happen to you. So don't be too worried about it, right? You're going to have, just like a corporation does, you're going to have that fund where you're going to maybe waste $2,000 or $10,000 this year, but that's just what it's going to take. And then lastly, not everyone's going to work out for you, right? When you are running a corporation, no matter how big you are, say you're a Fortune 5 company, there's a certain percentage of your consultants and your employees that are both not working up to their abilities, but they may not be doing a whole lot of work at all, right? And so of course that kind of thing is going to happen to you. So really just, those are the 4, kind of caveats here. Now, thinking about, why is it not advancing? There we go. Here we are to our first questions, and these are both on the Google Doc, or grab a pen and write down your answers to this. So thinking about, in the context of a business, what is your goal and what is your business model? So for instance, what will this accomplish or drive? If you are an employee or an executive at a large corporation, this is going to drive your career, right? So you want to make yourself look good in the industry and in the corporation where you are. If you're an entrepreneur, you're trying to build a company, right? So that's what you're trying to accomplish. You're trying to really build a startup company doing something else, whether it's in high tech or whatever. And why I have these both on one slide is because they really fit in with each other. Question 2 is, what are your personal revenue streams? And on the Google Doc, I ask you, what ones do you potentially want to build? And when I say, what are your personal revenue streams? If you are working full-time for a corporation, it's your salary, right? And it's your potential bonus if, in fact, you get a bonus or stock or benefits. Those are revenue streams for you. Maybe you want to add additional ones. Maybe it's some outside consulting on the side. Maybe it is professional speaking, so you get $5,000 or $10,000 a few times a year, which really supplements your revenue streams. Maybe it's writing a book and having book sales as one of your revenue streams. But there are many different revenue streams you can tap into as a thought leader. But that primary one, what is it? Write it down, because everything else that we're going to talk about today builds from these two concepts: what this is going to accomplish or drive, and what your revenue streams are. Okay, so this is your foundation of your content, and there's two parts to the foundation of your content. The first is, what is that fundamental truth that is not widely known, that you believe that other people may not believe? For instance, let me talk a little bit about my first platform. I became a professional speaker because of my healthcare technology background. Now, my first book, it's called The Patient as CEO. And that right there is my fundamental truth. I believe the patients are the CEO of the healthcare team, and they are the ones who are in charge of everyone else on the healthcare team, whether that's a physician or a nurse or what have you. Let me tell you, that is not a concept in healthcare that a lot of people believe yet. In fact, when I go and give talks in Japan and Germany, their mouths drop open because it's such a paternalistic healthcare system. The patients being in charge is just mind-blowing. So for you, what is that fundamental truth that you believe that other people may not know about yet or may not yet believe? Now, all of us have a lot of fundamental truths in our life. We believe a lot of different things. You need to talk about this as it relates to your revenue streams and to your overall goal. Everyone doing well? Perfect. All right, so that's the first half of your content foundation. And here is your second half of your content foundation: why you do what you do. Now, if you've ever heard of Simon Sinek, if you haven't seen his talks, I highly recommend after this, go ahead and Google him. He has a book and a TED Talk where it's Start With Why. He talks about people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do something, right? They don't buy what you do, but why you do it. So let me give you an example from my first platform, The Patient as CEO. Now, the reason I work in healthcare technology, and my life goal, by the way, is to impact 100 million patients worldwide. That's what I'm trying to accomplish or drive. It's because I'm also a chronic disease patient. At the age of 16, I was misdiagnosed with an autoimmune disease. By the time I was 26, I'd had 43 hospitalizations, 6 major surgeries, and 3 organs removed. I was also on extremely high dose painkillers because my doctors were telling me I was cured, but I wasn't. So finally, at the age of 26, on extremely high dose opioids, I went to my doctors and I said, I need off these meds now. And they said, okay, well, next step could be to surgically implant a morphine pump into your spine. It's like, are you kidding me? So I went home that night and I fired my healthcare team, took control of my healthcare, became the patient as CEO, got off all the meds, ended up getting diagnosed correctly, and I went into remission overnight as soon as they prescribed the right medication for me. That is why I do what I do. I took control of my healthcare in my 20s. Not only did it save my life, but it gave me back my life. So that hooks into both my fundamental truth, the patients are the CEO of the healthcare team, and why I do what I do. Do you see how that really gives that nice foundation for the content? So think about what your fundamental truth is, and then why you do what you do. Now, it could be in terms of something tragic, like what I'd gone through. It's, of course, that's always a fantastic story when you are talking about your whys. Did you have some kind of crazy epiphany, right? Did you overcome something that was incredibly difficult? Did you learn a lesson, right? Did you experience some kind of trauma? Now, don't worry if you don't have any of that in your life. That's amazing if you haven't, experienced trauma and that led to why you do something. It could just be you were bored in your day job and you suddenly thought you saw an ad and it sparked an idea, and that's why you started the company, right? I mean, it just needs to be, what is that why? Why are you doing what you're doing? Let me give you another example. So my new platform, which is a complete departure, obviously, from healthcare technology, which is what I'm talking about now. It's the Thought Leader Formula. I have a book, I have an online course, and I coach people on how to do this. The reason is because early in my career, I'm in Silicon Valley, and I'm a small, petite female. I was not treated well. Let me tell you, when the Me Too movement happened, and it was years after, I got harassed in the workplace, I was like, oh my God, I had no idea that there were so many other women facing sexual harassment and abuse and bullying and bias in the workplace. When I experienced it, I realized early on that I could not fight it. This was not something that, the men in the companies I was working for at the time, they looked the other way, and even in the face of gross abuse. And so I went home one day, just like I did with my healthcare, but I was a little bit older now. And I said, you know what? I'm going to change the game. I'm going to turn myself into a professional speaker and a thought leader, and then I have my own protection, and they cannot hurt me anymore. Let me tell you, the day my first book published in 2015, it was like flipping a light switch. Nobody has, there's been no bias whatsoever. I will come into a company, people either assume I'm the scientist or the CEO all the time. I am not a physician. Of course, I went to Shaw. And people call me Dr. Farmanfarmaian now all the time. Let me tell you, that one thing dramatically changed the game for me. So when the Me Too movement happened, I was like, wait a second, I have a solution for bias, whether it's because, and it's not just for women, of course, many people, in fact, most people sometime in their life face some type of bias or bullying or they're just ignored or passed over in the workplace because someone else is stealing their ideas or what have you. This is really my gift, essentially, for everybody out there who's faced anything, teaching them to do exactly what I did so that they can turn off that bias, they can turn off that bullying, they can really help other people as well. So go into this, question 4, make sure you've written down why you do what you do and what drives you, because that is what people are going to relate to. All right, so I know I saw the list of kind of what schools a lot of the people on the webinar are from, and I saw there's a lot of you from business and management and marketing. But those of you who are not from business and management and marketing, you may never heard of the word a customer avatar. So let me explain what that is. It's really understanding your audience and different attributes. Now here on the slide, I've got 12 different attributes listed. You don't have to answer all of these or know all of these about your traditional market, right? Or your audience. Just, it gives you a good idea. And this is question 5, by the way, so go ahead and write down when you understand what I'm talking about. Now, if you are an executive or an employee, say in a corporation, your customer avatar may in fact be your boss and your boss's boss. And in addition, it could be the decision makers, the management of competitive corporations. Because if you're driving your career and business goals, right, and you're trying to get promoted or make more money or have stronger negotiating power, the people who you want to know that you're a thought leader are those people with the power over your career and over your salary. So you may not need an audience of 10,000 people. You may only want to have an audience of about 20 people. But those 20 people knowing that you're a thought leader and knowing your content is incredibly important. If you're, an entrepreneur, most of the time your customer avatar are going to be both the people that you need to drive to your company for revenue, so that your customer or clients, and potentially those investors, right? So really think about, who is your perfect customer, right? Is it the client for your business? Are you an attorney or a consultant? Is it patients? Is it your boss? Is it your boss's boss, right? And think about different attributes. Are they on the East Coast or the West Coast, if that's relevant? What level of education have they had? Because right there, that's going to determine some of the ways you do messaging, right? What are their values? Are they incredibly religious, or are they, a certain political party? A lot of that will really be baked into how you present the content and information and where you present it, because that's starting to think about mapping your ecosystem and where your revenue streams live. And your revenue streams are your customer avatars. If they're your boss, they control your salary. If they're your clients, they control the amount of money that's coming into your firm, right? So thinking about this ecosystem, map out where that potential revenue stream will live. Are they on LinkedIn? Are they, if they're Generation Z, they're on TikTok, right? Thinking about, secondly, what conferences are out there in your particular world, right? Who else is moderating or on panels or keynoting those perfect conferences for you? Because the people on stage, those are your peers in the world of thought leadership. So starting to think about, okay, here are the top 5 conferences that I need to either attend or speak at. Who is there and who's in the room? Those are parts of your ecosystem. Thinking about what other speakers and thought leaders are in there, besides finding them at conferences, you can also find them through things like articles and books. So when I wrote the Thought Leader Formula, I did an Amazon search, and I found about 8 other people who work in this space. And I connected to all of them right away and said, hey, I'm writing a book that's similar to yours, and I would love to just be friends with you. And lastly, what kind of content format do they consume? If they're baby boomers, they are most likely reading newspapers still, right? If they are Gen Z, they are watching 15-second videos. If they are, Gen X, we are kind of in the middle, and we do both, right? We like to do a lot of reading, but we also like to watch videos. So on the question, go ahead and just answer maybe 1 or 2 of these. You can do it on the Google Doc as well, but list maybe 1 or 2 other thought leaders in your space, or potentially what kind of content that you should be doing, whether it's books or 15-second videos or hour-long videos. All right, content channels. There are many different ways to get your content out there. But one of the big things is if you're building a following, and you don't necessarily need to build a following. Again, if you are only trying to really get noticed by senior management in your industry, you don't need 10,000 or 100,000 followers. But if you're trying to drive clients to a consulting firm, maybe you do. Maybe you want 10,000 followers. It's all about consistency. Maybe you start to publish an article every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. And then your following gets used to that, right? It's all about that consistency. So of course, when you're choosing a content channel, choose 1 to 3. Do not choose all of them, right? Because it becomes completely overwhelming. Even myself, I've been in the industry now as a professional speaker for, I think, about 60 years. I do not do all of these, right? I do some of these. And so things like podcasts, I do a lot of guest appearances, but I have never created my own podcast. And let me tell you why. That in and of itself is a business, and it is incredibly difficult. And most podcasts fail purely because it takes over a year to build a following. And most people who build a podcast, they're like, by the time a year is out and they still only have a handful of followers, they end up giving up. But it's at that point, it's kind of an inflection. Once you've gotten to a certain point, whether that's a year or 2 years into something like a podcast, all of a sudden your viewership can go and explode. But all of these things take a significant amount of time, right? So that is, let me just talk a little bit about how to publish some of the articles. because this is something people get a little bit scared about sometimes if they've never published an article. Oh, and by the way, Jeff, I think I have one of my polls out there is how many people have published articles before. I think it's the second one. So if you've published an article, you can go ahead and take this poll, either 0, 1 to 5, 6 to 10, or more than 11 articles. There are many different ways to do this. One of my favorite places to publish articles is actually on LinkedIn, because not only is it fully under your own editorial, control, but in addition, when people look you up, one of the first places they go to is LinkedIn. And once they scroll down, they'll see a number of articles by you. So it's all housed in one place. It's even better than a website in a lot of ways. Secondly, you can do things like mainstream, companies like Forbes. Forbes has a lot of ways to publish your articles. I'm part of their BizDev membership club, which is just a regular membership club at Forbes. I think it's called their councils. And they publish as many articles as I can write. So as long as I want to write them or give them a quote, and they're constantly asking me, they just send me an email and they say, fill out this piece of paper where we have a quote. And I think it's a paid program now. When I joined, I'm one of the founding members, it was free. So it's, go ahead and look up the Forbes councils. They also have a pay to play one now where, that's the pay to play. They have one where they pay you. You have to find, and I don't have this connection, unfortunately. I have heard about it though. You find an introduction to Forbes and they pay you, I think, about $50 an article if you have a following and you start to be consistent and you build a following. If you want to do something like industry specific, I've done a lot of publishing in things like Frost and Sullivan Healthcare or Becker's Hospital Journal. Most people haven't heard of those. If you're in healthcare though, if you're a physician, you have heard of those. And that's where I put my healthcare stuff. The way I get into those most of the time is through a PR agency. And so when I first started my thought leader journey about 6 years ago, I hired a PR agency just for 6 months. And they helped me both write the articles because I was a novice writer back then and I didn't know how to do it very well. It's a skill. Now I'm an expert, but when I first started my journey, it was terrifying and incredibly hard for me to write articles. So I hired this firm and they would get on the phone with me and I would go over my ideas on, say, nanotechnology or artificial intelligence. They'd help me put it into a perfect 800-word article and then they would get it placed for me. And usually in an industry-specific journal of some kind, right? And then, of course, blogs. This is a fantastic thing for something like your virtual assistant. If you have a personal assistant or a virtual assistant, part of your team, you can have them go and research different blogs that you could potentially be published on and reach out, because I tell you, most people are looking for content. They want you to write articles for them. So getting that placed on relevant blogs is relatively easy. All right. So
can you see the results on your screen, Robin? Looks like we do have a couple writers in the audience.
We do. Whoa, somebody has over 11. That's awesome. That's huge, by the way. So, but most of you guys, or it looks more than 50%, have no articles. And that's totally fine. That's where I was 6 years ago. And I mean, and now I've been actually in 13 countries, which is crazy, right? So it happens fast. You just have to get out there. And that is the next question, is starting to think about your content channels, right? And that's really about the intersection of where your revenue lives and what you love to do. For instance, if you are trying to reach Gen Z and you hate TikTok or you hate Snapchat and that's where they are, don't use them. Find another way to either get to them, or you can have people on your team posting into those things. If you hate Twitter, you don't have to be on it. Most of the time, when we're trying to get revenue stream, and I looked at the ages, I think most of you are right around my age or within 10, 15 years of my age. So we're trying to reach people who are already middle management or higher most of the time. And that's going to be on, say, LinkedIn, right? And that's an easy enough one to publish on. And that's your question. Which ones do you want to choose? And in the beginning, really just choose one or two. If you try to go and be everything for everyone, it's just going to be overwhelming and you're not going to build a following anywhere because you're too spread out. So if you really focus, for instance, I focus mostly on Facebook and LinkedIn. That's where I have my followings. And that's really my age group that I'm trying to reach are on those two platforms. My friends are on those two platforms. I get engagement on those. So really that's where I'm spending my time. So for you guys, write down 1 or 2 different content channels. And if you're not anywhere yet, that's totally fine. Or if you have, you know, a few hundred followers on something, again, totally fine, right? You're just starting this in a lot of cases. All right, so about writing a book. Let me tell you, this was the single biggest thing that catapulted my thought leader career. Not only did it catapult my thought leader career, but it changed the equation in all of my day jobs as well, right? So I've had almost every opportunity that I've had, whether I'm co-founding a company or coming on as an investor or an advisor, these opportunities presented themselves to me because of my book. So I'm going to teach you a couple of different hacks in order to get this done and painlessly, because let me tell you, if you are terrified or don't think you can write a book, you are in the majority. And I would say that was me 6 years ago. I was like, I know I need to write a book, but how am I going to get this done? I was terrified. I was a brand new writer. I didn't have the skills. And I'm very, you know, I'm very interactive. So to sit in front of a computer screen for a year writing a book just sounded like torture to me. So let me teach you 2 hacks right off the bat. First, you can do something like what I call write a PDF. And that is a 20 to 80 page Word doc that you format and turn into a PDF and upload to Amazon, and bam, you've got your book done. Now, let me tell you, I coached one of my friends into doing this. She was an artist, like a painter, right? She painted. And she became a blockchain expert, and she went to all the blockchain conferences and really wanted to become a thought leader and known for blockchain. But she was an artist, so what was she gonna do? Said, you know what? You don't wanna be an expert on blockchain in front of other blockchain people. What you wanna be is an expert on blockchain for people who don't know anything about it. Blockchain 101. And of course, all of us can write the 101, or at least understand the 101 of our particular industry really well, because we've been in it usually for at least a few years. So she sat down in 1 week and she wrote about 25 or 30 pages, and she ended up going further. She ended up writing, I think, 60 or 80 in the end. But it took no time at all because it was just a brain dump on 101. And she ended up formatting it. Took her about 8 days all in, right, to get this done. I looked through it and edited a little bit. It didn't need very much editing. She took my cover of my first book, switched out the photo for hers, switched out the words for Blockchain 101, Fundamentals of a New Economy, uploaded it to Amazon, and within 3 months, she was speaking at MIT. Like, if that doesn't give you chills, I have to tell you, a book is that powerful. Now, the thing is, hundreds, if you're lucky with a book, single-digit thousands are going to read it, right? Most likely, and this is the vast majority of books out there in the business world, hundreds, 200, 300 people over the life of the book will read your book. That's not why you have it. You do not have it for people to buy and read, although, you know, go and buy my books. You have it so that people know you've written a book. It is really what I call your $3 business card. The fact that you have written a book is what opens up doors. Most people don't ever read it. And so that's why your book cover is so incredibly important. And I will get to that in a second. But your first hack is to write that 25 or 30 page PDF. Doesn't have to be very long, right? It just needs to be something you can upload to Amazon. Most books now are self-published. Do not, if you are a new writer and you don't have a following of at least 100,000 to 1 million, don't even try to go to the big traditional publishers, right? Unless, of course, you already have a name or you're the CEO of a major corporation. It's not worth your time, and it's expensive for no reason at all. Most of the time, traditional publishers do not actually provide much value. In my book, I tell you exactly what kind of value they do add, but it's not enough for especially somebody who's in the world of thought leadership, because our revenue streams are not book sales. You can expect to make about $2 to $5 a book, if that, right? And so do the math. How many books would you need to sell at $2 to $5 a book profit in order to pay your rent for 1 month? You're not even going to make that much money, most likely, right, over the course of the book. It is all about the fact that you have it done. So if writing even 25 pages is too scary, which let me tell you, 6 years ago for me, it was too scary. There are a couple of ways you get this done even faster. So you can use these content companies like Scripted.com. It's a subscription model for like $100-something a month. And then you can hire individual writers for about $60 to $90 an article. So hire different writers to write maybe 5 or 10 articles for you around your area of expertise. You go onto Scripted and say you are an expert in artificial intelligence. So you just say, hey, I want an article on AI as applied to healthcare, and list these 3 companies, describe these 3 companies in the article. And bam, in a week or 2, they have the article back for you. You do that for about 10 articles, and all of a sudden you have all the content you need for a book. So either you can just put, each article can be its own chapter, write a foreword, write a conclusion, and bam, you're done with your book. Hire an editor for $40 to $80 an hour using like virtual assistant companies. I use one called Leverage, and I can introduce you to them, but there's many, many of them out there. And just like the content editors, content writers, they've got content editors. Or those content editors will be able to write that forward and conclusion for you. So it's your ideas, but you just had somebody else do all the heavy lifting of the writing. Because remember, this is a company, you are just the CEO and an expert in the content. You've got to hire those other divisions if you don't have that skill set yet in order to get your company off the ground. Now, there's a third way, and this is what I used. I used a company called Scribe Media, but there are many of these companies that do the exact same process for you. This is amazing. It's much more expensive. So those first ones I was talking about, essentially free or single-digit thousands max. This is more like $25,000 to $35,000, but totally worth it if you want a full-length book. A full-length book in the world of business is about 30 to 35,000 words. Which is about 180-page paperback. My thought leader formula ended up going up to 50,000 words. 50,000 is a very long business book now, right? And that's about 260 pages of a paperback. People want shorter books. So that's really good news for most of us. Shorter the book, the better. Now, what Scribe Media does, and all these other companies, they're very similar. What they do is they spend about 14 hours with you and get the book done in those 14 hours of your time. So for the first, say, I think it's 4 hours over a couple of phone calls, they jump on the call with you and with an expert outliner. And that's all this person does all day long is they outline books. And so you get on the phone and she helps you outline your entire book, record the call, transcribe it, and then present you back with your own information, perfectly outlined. And then the next 10 hours, you jump on a phone, and of course, over a period of weeks, with what's called your scribe. And they go through your entire outline and you talk your entire book. They ask you, okay, chapter 1, here's the first bullet point. Talk to me about that. And you say, oh, well, AI in healthcare is exploding right now because of these 7 companies and blah, blah, blah. They transcribe it, do the full edit for you, and present you back in a couple of months with like literally almost a perfect book. You do one edit, which takes as long as you want it to take, send it back to them, and bam, your book's done. It is the most amazing system because it's 100% your content. It is 100% your voice. In fact, when you read my books, you can hear my voice in your head. It's that true to who you are. So that brings me to question 8. Assuming some of these hacks, or you just doing it yourself, what is your book title and your subtitle? Because the cover of your book is really by far the most important thing on your book. The reason I have myself on both of my covers, my face, is because I'm not trying to sell books. I make a few dollars per book, right? That's nothing. I call that shoe money because I can just throw it away on buying, frilly shoes or something. It's all about your other revenue streams. And so what's your book title and your subtitle? Because that is your fundamental truth, essentially, right? It goes back to what's your foundation of your entire of your entire thought leader platform, right? Because, and everyone in the world of marketing knows how to do this, you know, your elevator pitch, essentially, it needs to fit on that back of the napkin. So really getting that idea down and down perfectly. And so this is what's going to essentially be marketed to everyone. Oh, and by the way, when you do podcasts about your book, or you do interviews or keynotes or whatever, the one photo that's shared everywhere is your book cover. So you want it to represent you perfectly in a split second. All right, so how to get on stage. And by the way, I think question number 1, you can send out, Jeff, and that is how many times have you been on stage? And most of the time it's going to be 0, right? You're just starting this, so that's totally fine. But there might be some of you who have either given a keynote or been on a panel or moderated. So go ahead and vote on the poll so I kind of see, you know, where the area of expertise is with everyone. But there are many ways to get on stage. The very first thing that you need to think about is that you need to make a video. And let me tell you, because nobody is going to ask you to be on stage, even for just a panel, if they can't see you on video. So it's a catch-22. If you've never been on stage and you want to be, and you have a keynote written, right? So this is, of course, assuming you've got some of your content down and you've got your keynote written. By the way, the first keynote I did, I brought on script writers and a professional designer so that I went out of the gate with a fully professional keynote. But what you can do is you can hack it. I do this sometimes for some of my clients. There's a stage down the street at SRI. It's only $250 to hire, to rent the stage for a few hours. And so go and rent the stage and a videographer who rents their camera equipment, and get up there and give your keynote as if there were an audience in the room. And get that on video and upload it to YouTube, because that is your second calling card, right? And if you haven't been on stage, you may as well just hack it that way, because then you can make sure it's perfect versus having that huge pressure of being in front of a live audience. You can do things like, okay, so we got the poll results. Nice. Oh, I love how most of you have been up at least a few times, which is amazing. So good job, because those first few are by far the hardest to get up to. But there are many other things. You know, you can just apply anything that's public facing, where you can buy a ticket for like $100 or $50. Those usually you just apply to them. So you just go on their website and it says apply to be a speaker. This is very true, especially in the world of academia as well. Most of the academic conferences, they're all by application only. And most of the time you're gonna get a space. They're gonna say yes. You can sponsor an event, and that could be in-kind sponsoring. Maybe it's that your company has a large social media following and you're a media sponsor, right? All you do is you tweet every once in a while, and maybe they'll let you on stage for that. Or you could even put on your own event, and this could just be in your office or your home. And so that you can record that, and you can have your audience, and they can be by invitation only, but it really gets you on stage for those first times to get you kind of used to being in front of a live audience and speaking. One of the biggest things, though, is that volunteering. And even if you're a C-level, right, you can volunteer as a kind of sponsor, right? Maybe it's you sponsor for $100 or something like that. It can be very small. But if you're volunteering or sponsoring at that event, you typically have access to meeting almost everyone who's there. Not only that, but you get in good with the event organizers. And guess who makes the decision on who goes on stage most of the time? Are the event organizers, right? So that brings me to question number 9. Which 2 events could be the first ones or the next 2 events for those of you who have already been on stage? Which ones could be for you, right? Is it going to be a TEDx? Do you want to create one in your home? Do you want to rent a stage? You can even bring in 5 or 10 people into an audience if you'd like, that are your friends, right? Kind of low pressure. But thinking about if you're intentional about what you want to do and what stages you want to be on, you can make it happen. Let me tell you, there is a TEDx out there for everybody. There are over 5,000 TEDx's a year. So all you need to do is kind of find the ones that are in line with your content. And I just wanted to just show this to you briefly. You guys are going to get these slides, so you will get this chart as well. But it's one of the things that most people going into speaking don't know is who actually pays for what, and how do you make those $10,000 keynote fees, right? And if you want to be a professional speaker where you are making those $5,000 to $20,000 keynote fees, that is almost always going to be because it's a corporation or an association, one of those giant associations like the American Academy of Dermatology or the American Nurses Association. Those are the types that I will speak at and get paid for it. But almost all the rest of the conferences and events out there, they don't pay for speakers. I go much more deeply into this in my book, but this is just, in general, so you understand who pays for travel, who pays for hotel, and who will actually pay you to speak. And that brings me to question 10, which is the last question, because I want to leave some time for Q&A. Just write down, what's a one-year goal of yours related to thought leadership, right? Maybe you just want to do that first keynote. Maybe you want to write a 25-page PDF book that you can upload to Amazon. But thinking about what is that one-year goal? With that, I will take some questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Robin. We've got a couple questions that have come in already in the chat, but I would ask folks, take this chance to ask Robin your questions by clicking on Q&A. Robin, we've got one person named Fortune who I think might have misunderstood some of the points you were making earlier on in your presentation.
Sure.
So could you, this I think gets to sort of the Simon Sinek piece and starting with why. Can you talk a little bit more about, you had said like it doesn't have to be a hardship that you talk about. This person has concerns about privacy, but can you drill down a little bit more about how people really can evaluate what their why is and how they would sort of tell that personal story as it relates to their thought leadership?
Sure. So the best ones, of course, are ones that are true, right? But you can like, kind of make up your own story as well. So if you don't want to give out the private things, don't use that why. We all have a huge number of why we do something, right? So I chose to work on sleep apnea for a while, not because I have sleep apnea. And in fact, I don't think I have anyone in my family who has sleep apnea, but I understand the importance of sleep. Right? And for me, sleep is a massive passion. And so when I decided to take control of my sleep habits 5 years ago and make sure that every night, no matter what, I get 7 to 9 hours of sleep, and I try and go to bed every day and wake up at the same time every day, 7 days a week. And I became much more productive, and I felt like I was smarter because of that. See, I just gave you a why I worked in sleep apnea. Had no hardship whatsoever. It was, I didn't phrase it well enough for it to be super interesting, but you can make that kind of a story very, very relatable because most people probably aren't getting enough sleep. So when you're talking about that, you could say something like, hey, who in the audience feels like they need to get more sleep? Raise your hand, right? And so it's something that a lot of people can relate to. So thinking about some of your whys, maybe they're not like super strong whys, right? But they are something that relates to it. Did that answer the question?
Fortune, go ahead and use the chat and let us know if you need some elaboration on the question that you asked. Robin, we're looking at the covers. Fortune says thank you, and yes. We're looking at the covers of your books, and right at the bottom, we all notice that you've got these endorsements. Somebody's asked, how do you go about getting those sort of quotes for the cover of your book?
So you just ask, right? There were a bunch of people I asked for quotes, and I have 10 or 15 quotes on the inside of both books as well. And I got a lot of time people didn't write me back, or they said no, they didn't have time to read my book, or whatever. I probably got turned down 50% of the time. The ones that said yes, it's just, I reached out to that many people, 30 or 40 people. And some of them were strangers. Some of them were not. Both of the people on the cover of my book, for Peter, I worked for him for 3 years. So he was actually my boss. And I had left the company by the time I wrote this book. But I pinged him and I'm like, hey, Peter, will you write this for me? And I know him well enough to know that I had to write it for him to edit. And so that's what I did. I used his wording because I worked for him. I know how he talks. And so I wrote like a phrase that he would use. And then I sent it over to him with his assistant on the CC. And I said, do you want to edit this or approve it? And I'm going to put it on the front of my book. And he said, approved, and bam, that's how I got it from him. Dory Clark, the way I met her, and she's a big deal in the world of thought leadership as well, is we happen to have been published in the same, in just a newspaper article or a magazine article, I think it was Inc. I just reached out to her and I said, hey, we were in the same article years ago. I would love for you to be the quote on my cover. And here is a quote that I think is perfectly relevant for you. And so the trick is both reach out to as many people as you can. I reached out to like the CMO of GE and stuff like that, who didn't get back to me. I mean, you just reach for the stars, and sometimes it will just, the stars will align and they'll say yes. And have your backups, right? Like have 5 or 6 people that are backup that can write that quote for you, right? And I mean, or sign the quote that you've written that's relevant for your content. Because that's one of the other tricks to making sure that people get things done for you, is that you do it for them and they just approve it.
Great. We've got a great question from, I think you pronounce the name Gaushin. My apologies if I'm saying your name wrong. This specific person, I'm a medical device regulatory expert. I work full-time and going to law school on the weekends to become an IP patent lawyer. Most of my work is done in-house. Only my employers know. How can I share my expertise with a wider audience without jeopardizing my full-time job? Obviously, that's everything you're talking about today, but how would you directly respond to that question?
Well, the employer probably doesn't mind if you write about medical device regulation and publish that on LinkedIn, I would imagine. Like, you don't have to write about the cases that you're working on, obviously, or, you know, and by the way, my dad's an IP attorney and I work in med device, so I really love what you're doing. But yeah, they shouldn't mind that you just have some random articles up on LinkedIn to start, right? Because that's your own business and you're doing it on weekends. And you can hack it to have somebody else get it done for you.
Fortune's asking for some elaboration on something that I think that you also sort of talked about at the beginning of your talk today. But I guess, Fortune, I'm going to sort of summarize your question here a little bit. Does any of your advice change or the formula change for thought leadership in more of a visual medium? So as an example, Fortune works in photography and design. What is your advice for helping that person establish a thought leadership when it isn't necessarily about talking? It's more about showing visual products.
It's both, right? So it depends on what you want to do and who your audience is. Really, we're going back to where your revenue streams and why you're trying to be a thought leader. But there's 2 ways that I can see it. First of all, visual is the medium now, right? So photos, pictures, and video are the big things that people are going after more than the written word in a lot of cases. So you can do a graphic novel or even just a graphic article, right? You can tell stories in photos. But the big thing is that you can also teach it. So create photography for entrepreneurs or photography for beginners, or hey, you want a photography career? Here are the first 3 steps you take, right? You have so much knowledge and advice on just how you got into your industry and how you, that alone is incredibly valuable content.
A question from Virginia. Can you talk a little bit, you showed earlier a big chart of all the different sort of content channels, you know, articles, podcasts.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit more about how you evaluate which direction to go in? You said obviously don't do all of these, but how do you really sort of define which ones are going to be most successful based on what your thought leadership is around?
So where your audience is. You just need to understand who are you trying to reach and what do they like to do. Are they on Facebook or LinkedIn? And I'm guessing most, if it's business, they're going to be on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is really up and coming as a very strong content provider now. So most likely, most of the people on the webinar would probably want LinkedIn. But it's both where they live, but what do you love? Because you are creating your own career. And that's like one of the best things about thought leadership is that you get to create the perfect career for yourself. So go on those channels that you also love to be on and you love to create content for. If it's torture for you, don't do it.
Thanks for recapping that. And then one last question from John, who I'm guessing maybe might have joined us a little bit late, but he's wondering, were you always an entrepreneur, or did you start with a conventional job and a career? You talked a little bit about this, but maybe tell us a bit more about your full story, if you don't mind.
Sure. No, I've always been an entrepreneur. Yeah, definitely a crazy entrepreneur. I started in genetic testing, went to EMRs, then med device, then early stage pharmaceutical. And all of this was, I live in California. So when I graduated from BU, I hopped a plane and I moved to San Francisco and Silicon Valley. Now I'm in Palo Alto, and that's just kind of what you do out here. You're either an entrepreneur or you're a techie. There are other jobs, obviously, but those are the two main things. And I just it fit my personality so well. And being an entrepreneur, you get to create every job that you work in. Like, there are no cookie cutter jobs. Like, you don't apply to be a CMO somewhere because it doesn't exist yet because you're in an early stage company. So you really get to write your own job description. But yeah, no, I started in entrepreneurship.
Well, Robin, this was, I think, a fantastic talk. And at least for me, I can only speak for myself here, but you always see people who are thought leaders and you think that it just sort of happened. And it's so interesting to see somebody sort of lay out how you can be just so incredibly purposeful about it and make it happen for yourself. So thank you. So I know you're incredibly busy. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this for our BU alumni community today.
Ooh, I love BU. So, of course.
Awesome.
I just don't like the weather in Boston anymore.
It's nice and warm today. It's 62 out right now.
Okay,
November,
so that's crazy. That's a little crazy.
Global warming, not to get political. Thank you again, Robin. I also want to thank all of our guests for participating today. I specifically want to thank those of you who've donated to BU in the past. All of this work is done because of your support. We have some great webinars coming up over the next couple months. Our next webinar is actually this Thursday, the day after tomorrow, and it's called Right Career, Right Now, helping people really figure out what it is that they should be doing and how to go about doing it. I encourage all of you to visit our website, bu.edu/alumni, where you can see all of the webinars that are coming up and sign up for Thursdays. We still have some space for that one. In the meantime, I also want to encourage all of you to check out our alumni career interview podcast, something I'm particularly passionate about now. We've got this podcast. It's called Proud to BU, where we find interesting alumni with great career stories to tell. They share their advice. They reflect on their BU experience. You can listen to the podcast wherever you normally find podcast episodes or on our website at bu.edu/alumni/podcast. And as always, if you or any BU alumni would be interested in being a thought leader and doing a webinar for Boston University, just like Robin, please feel free to contact me at the Alumni Relations Office or by email at jtmurphy@bu.edu. Thank you again, Robin.
Thank you.
And thanks, everybody. Have a great day or a great evening, wherever you might be.